Dennis Schroder is being traded to the Warriors. What a great pickup for the Warriors. The Brooklyn Nets are sending Dennis Schroder and a second-round pick to the Warriors for DeAnthony Melton and 3 second-round picks. The Warriors could not have asked for a better trade. I talked about this in my last video. DeAnthony Melton was literally the perfect player for the Warriors. That's exactly what they wanted and needed, which is why they went and got Dennis Schroder. DeAnthony Melton can handle the ball, get his own shot, create shots for others, and play very good defense. And so the available guards on the market who could do similar things to DeAnthony Melton in some ways was Dennis Schroder. Because we knew Brooklyn, or at least we thought, Brooklyn is in a selling mode. Dennis Schroder can score. We know this. He's done this everywhere he's been. But right now he's averaging 18 points per game. He's also shooting about 39% from 3, which I believe is a career high for him. And we know the Warriors like to shoot threes and they like to make them at an efficient clip. But obviously it's not just the scoring. Like I said, they wanted someone who could handle the ball. We know Dennis Schroder can pass the ball, get others involved. He's averaging about 6 or 7 assists. And while Dennis Schroder may not be as elite of a defender as DeAnthony Melton is, Dennis Schroder is definitely an underrated defender. One thing Dennis Schroder is fast, and he will hustle for you on defense. I mean, he uses that speed on offense as well, which is an advantage for him. But on defense, he will make sure that he's in your face. A good comparison is kind of Patrick Beverley. I'm not saying his defense is as good as Patrick Beverley's was, but the way that Patrick Beverley would be like on top of you and get up in you, that's kind of how Dennis Schroder plays defense. It's an unfortunate situation for DeAnthony Melton because the Warriors would have loved him to be in the rotation. He was before he got hurt. But because he literally could not contribute anymore, they had to trade him because they are trying to compete for a championship. And unfortunately, he's taking a roster spot. Those are the times where it's like, human versus business. Obviously, it's a business for the Warriors. And they did have to trade him in order to make sure they had another player who could help out on the team. But at the same time, you still feel bad for DeAnthony Melton. You want to know what's really interesting about this trade? Yes, I think the Warriors are better because I think Dennis Schroder makes them better in all the ways that I listed, and I think he fits in. But did you know that the Warriors can actually aggregate his salary in another trade? If you watched the video yesterday, you know I was talking about the potential Jimmy Butler trade scenarios and how certain teams cannot aggregate salaries. The reports are that the Warriors are still looking for a star to pair alongside Steph Curry and Draymond Green. Even though they made this trade, they're not necessarily standing pat with this roster. I didn't even think of this as an option or know it was an option until I heard Shams say it, and that is that when they or if they make another trade for some kind of star, they can include Dennis Schroder's contract. And that is so significant because Dennis Schroder is making about $13 million per year. And because the Warriors can aggregate salaries, which means that they can add, let's say, Dennis Schroder and another player on the roster to a deal, whereas Phoenix, for example, cannot do that. And if they were doing a deal, it'd have to be like straight up Bradley Beal or Kevin Durant or Devin Booker. But when they're looking for a star, any star in the league or most stars in the league are making $30+ million. The Warriors are obviously not going to give up Steph or Draymond, and there are some players on the roster who don't make enough money to even match those kind of salaries. And I'm not advocating for them to just trade players away, but what I'm saying is Dennis Schroder could actually be one of the biggest trade pieces because he is a valuable player, and his contract will help them if they're going to trade for some player, some kind of star. It will help them match the salaries in order to get the trade done. Because again, DeAnthony Melton, very good player when he's healthy. I always loved his game for years, but unfortunately he is not. And other teams who you're trying to get a star from aren't very likely to want to take, him back on because he's not going to play any games without some kind of other compensation. Whereas the Nets, who are in rebuild mode, were okay with taking DeAnthony Melton's contract, which isn't like super large, but they're okay with him not playing any games because they got some picks back. Other teams may be looking for actual players who are going to play this season back, and we know Dennis Schroder, again, can compete and can be a very good player on multiple teams. Also have to wait and see who becomes available closer to the trade deadline. I said yesterday, the package that was being proposed for Jimmy Butler doesn't really make sense to me for the Warriors. That was before this trade, but still, I feel like they're giving up too much. And that's partly because the Jimmy Butler trade is almost impossible to make with any team. So in order to make it work, money-wise and all that stuff, it becomes complicated. I don't think the Brandon Ingram one is what they are looking for. Brandon Ingram is a good player, don't get me wrong, but I think they're looking for someone that is a bigger star than Brandon Ingram. And that's no disrespect to Brandon Ingram, because when healthy, we know he could drop 30 on any given night. And I don't know what he's averaging this season. He didn't play a ton, but he's probably averaged 25 in previous seasons. You know, in that playoff series, when Zion was out and they were playing, I think they were playing the Phoenix Suns, he was cooking the Suns. Obviously, especially with the surge that the Bucks are having, Giannis is not available. But of course, that would be like their ideal. Listen, before the season started, I floated around the idea of LeBron to the Warriors. I also floated around the idea of Kevin Durant to the Warriors. Now, that would be impossible to get both of them now, because at the time LeBron was a free agent, which is why I thought it could work, because you could trade for Kevin Durant and LeBron could sign as a free agent. LeBron would have had to take a significant pay cut though. I don't know if he was going to do that, so that's a whole nother story. And there are no reports that LeBron wants to leave. We've heard many times he loves LA. Obviously, his son is on the team now. So I'm not saying that, but that is still an option. Because if LeBron wants to win another title, that gives him a good spot to win a title with Steph Curry, who he loves to play with. Obviously, we know him and Draymond Green are very good friends. And he's also still in the California area, which means he's close to Bronny, which I'm telling you would factor into his decision. Like, he would want to be somewhat close to Bronny. I think the Kevin Durant one is less likely now than it was before the season started. But I'm just saying, just floating around names here. So it really just depends who becomes available. Like, every year at the trade deadline, we see someone who we don't expect, who is a star, to be available. So I do expect that to happen again, and we'll just see who gets that player. But I do think whether or not they make another trade after this for a star player, I do think this makes them better. I don't think there's any question or debate about that. Like, Dennis Schroder is going to make this team better.